You've probably heard the expression, if all of your friends jumped off a bridge, would you do it too? If you did not hear it from your own parents, you most likely heard it from parents on television. It's a question designed to make students stop and consider the power of peer pressure. There's only one problem. People are likely to jump off a bridge after losing all of their pals. At the very least, there is a better possibility than you might expect. Conformity pushes people to discard all logic and reality. Why else would 900 people consume poisoned Kool-Aid in Jonestown? Why would individuals perpetrate such heinous actions as those during World War II and the Holocaust? In the second part of the 20th century, psychologists conducted experiments on conformity, social psychology, and obedience. The Asch line test was one of the most well-known experiments at the time. In this video, I will discuss the line test and how it demonstrates the power of peer pressure and compliance. So, the Asch line test, also known as the Asch Conformity Experiment, sought to determine how frequently people would forego reason in order to perform. They were carried out in the 1950s by a psychologist called Solomon Asch. Asch led individual participants into a room full of Confederates, which are essentially performers. To assess the group's vision, researchers asked a series of questions. Of course, the Confederates or actors were present during the experiments and responded to Asch's questions as instructed. One of these vision tests involved looking at a line on one side of the board and 3 lines on the other, designated A, B, and C. One of the lines had the same length as the individual line, while the others were significantly longer or shorter. Asch answered a series of questions to determine which lines were the same length as the individual lines. This was not a difficult test. It was quite basic. Asch ran tests in which participants had to guess which line had the same length without the influence of anyone else. Participants replied correctly 99% of the time, matching the appropriate lines. He then conducted research to demonstrate that when people can make and share decisions privately, they are less likely to conform. Sometimes the group answered properly, but not always. Asch directed the Confederates to confidently select the incorrect response. It was typically evident that the response was incorrect, yet none of the actors batted an eye. The participant would then have to make a decision. Would they trust their instincts, choose the correct answer, and answer individually from the group, or would they succumb to peer pressure and select the incorrect response? These responses left little opportunity for argument because they were rather straightforward. However, 75% of participants answered erroneously at least once in order to fit in with the group. That is a large number of people giving the incorrect response in order to conform to the majority. When all of Asch's studies were merged and the data was collated, researchers discovered that 33% of the time, participants simply went with the flow. This is mind-boggling in psychology. Now let's speak about the elements that influenced the experiment. Because while this is one of the most well-known studies in social psychology, it is far from flawless. Asch conducted over a dozen studies, and the types of participants did not vary significantly. The majority of participants were male Swarthmore College students. Perhaps their gender or education influences whether they conform to the group. Perhaps the Confederates they chose, the players, had an impact. According to more recent research on conformity, the peers who are pressuring others may have an impact on compliance. If a participant identifies with the Confederates in the group, they may be more likely to follow group norms. But let's zoom out even further. The study was carried out in the United States of America in the 1950s. Many psychologists speculated that the time period may have influenced the findings, as the students in the study were likely aware of the Red Scare and McCarthyism tactics used to blacklist people for supposed communist activities. McCarthy's inquiry did not involve any reasoning. People who did not adapt to America's economic ideals risked losing their jobs and dignity. In summary, there was a lot of pressure to conform across the country. But as we move forward, why do we conform? All of these variables, as well as the effects, cause you to question why we conform. The Asch line test is commonly used to support the concept of normative social influence. Participants are encouraged to conform to the group in order to avoid social punishment. They don't want to be perceived as an outsider. We discussed this extensively in our in-group and out-group bias videos. Critics of this theory contend that the desire is purely to escape punishment rather than to conform. They regard these two different things as separate judgments. Another type of influence is informational influence, which occurs when someone believes that the group is more knowledgeable than they are. While this may not have occurred during the Asch line trials, it is more likely that normative social influence was the cause. After all, it seemed rather evident which line was the best decision. I mean, you can examine it yourself. Solomon Asch's conformity experiments date back over 60 years. Psychologists from all across the world have replicated these findings. Since then, academics have evaluated a variety of characteristics, including gender, nationality, culture, and age. In many of these tests, the majority of individuals followed the group at least once. Conformity occurred, but with a limited number of individuals each time. Jumping off a bridge is significantly different from deciding one line is the same length as another, but peer pressure can impact a person's decision. So the next time you find yourself going against your instincts, consider this Asch line test. Do you feel you could be wrong, or do you simply want to fit in with the group? I believe that one significant takeaway from this experiment is that you should speak up whenever you believe you are thinking differently from others. I feel communication is a critical takeaway from this experiment, as Asch stated in one of the experiments. When all of the Confederates could speak, they grew more convinced that the participant was correct. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video about the Asch line experiment and learned something. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. And as always, I'd love for you to check out my social psychology series. Thank you for viewing. I hope to see you in the next video.